Okay, so day 2 is going to be dividing using synthetic division. Okay, so this is another way you can divide polynomials. Okay, but you can only use it to divide by a binomial of degree 1. Okay, so it's an alternate method that you can use if you're dividing by a binomial of degree 1. So if it has the degree of 1, what kind of function is it? Linear. Yep, okay, so it just has to be a linear binomial in order to use synthetic division. Okay, and once you get the hang of it, I do think you're going to like it. It is simpler. We're going to be using mental math. So after you write your polynomial in standard form, what you're going to do is you are going to write the coefficients of the dividend, or what's being divided. If the dividend is missing a term, you have to use 0 as a placeholder. So yesterday we had a couple examples where we were using a placeholder, and I told you that sometimes it's useful, other times you don't have to have it. When you're doing synthetic division, you do have to have 0 as a placeholder. Okay? You are going to write the constant A of the divisor. They say in the box, and I'll show you where that's going to go. So in order to do that, if your divisor is x minus a, okay, the reasoning behind this is if this is your divisor, you can set that equal to 0 and solve. So write this down with me. Set the divisor equal to 0 and solve. So whatever they give you, you would set that equal to 0. If I am solving for x, I would have to add a to both sides. And I would get that x is equal to a. This is what you are going to put in our synthetic division box, which I will show you in just a moment. So when they say write this constant a, it comes from this solving process. All right, so we are going to do these steps together as we go through this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the dividend is in standard form, so x squared x and then 4. Okay, and then it said to write the coefficients of the dividend. So we are going to make our synthetic division setup, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to make half of a rectangle, the lower half of a rectangle. You guys with me? Okay, and then we're just going to put a little box here. So it said to write the coefficients of the dividend. So you have to write those in order. So the first coefficient is 3. The next coefficient, -8. The next coefficient, 4. Okay, so after writing the polynomial in standard form, write the coefficients of the dividend. Okay, if there's a placeholder needed, we would put that in. We don't need any placeholders here. There's no missing terms. Okay, then we're going to write the constant of the divisor in the box. So this is your divisor. Okay, to figure out what goes in the box, all we have to do is set x minus 2 equal to 0. So if I add 2 to both sides, x is going to equal 2. That's what's going to go in your box here. Okay, so you set your divisor equal to 0, you solve. Now we have our setup, so put the 2 in the box here. Okay, and now we're ready to rock and roll. So the first thing you have to do after this setup is bring the first coefficient down. Okay, so the first coefficient is 3, so you are going to bring this down. Okay, now we're going to look at step 2. So step 2 says multiply the number just written in the bottom row by the A value. So you're going to multiply 3 by 2. So what's 3 times 2? 6. It's going to go in the next blank space. Okay, so it said write the product under the next coefficient. That's what we did. And then you are going to add or subtract straight down, just depending on what you have. Okay, so this is negative 8 plus 6, which is going to be negative 2. And then we do the process again. So negative 2, so it says add the product and the coefficient above it. We did that. Okay, that was our step 3. And then you are just going to repeat those steps until you reach the last column. So negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. Add straight down, you get 0. Okay, so then this last number here is your remainder. So when you are writing the quotient, okay, it says the numbers along the bottom row are the coefficients of the quotient. The power of the first term is 1 less than the degree of the dividend. Okay, I usually start from the back and just go up because I know this is the remainder and then this is going to be the constant term or your number and this is going to be x, but it really doesn't matter. You can also just say, hey, if this is x squared, this is going to be x, this is going to be the constant or the number term, this would be the remainder. Okay, so if you guys think you're going to see that as a hashtag, you could go ahead and write constant. So your solution is just 3x minus 2. Okay, so when you're lining these up, these are the coefficients of your terms. So this is the coefficient of x squared, the coefficient of x, and your constant term. That's how you're lining those up, and that's how you can see if something is missing. Okay, now you might remember from yesterday, this negative 1 just means division. And this does tell you to use synthetic division, so if it tells you to use synthetic, you have to do that. If it tells you to use long division, you would have to do that. Okay, so we can just start by understanding that this is the divisor, right? So if this is the divisor, what is x going to equal? Negative 2. Okay, and it's fine if you are realizing that right away and you're putting that value on there. Okay, so let's do our setup. One suggestion I have for you is don't try to scrunch things in. Don't be afraid to use space. Usually if people make a mistake on this, it's because numbers are too close together and they read it as a different number. Okay, so let's start with the coefficients. So is this in standard form? Yes. So if you start with x to the 4th, you should have a coefficient for x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x to the 2nd, x, and your constant term. Okay, so right now I want you to take a moment and I want you to list the coefficients. Okay, and if you feel you can do that process without me, like you can go further, please feel free. Just make sure you're checking in. Okay, so the coefficient for x to the 4th was 3. For x to the 3rd, negative 1. There was a no x squared, so we have to put in the 0. For x, it was 5, and the constant is negative 1. Okay, so then you are going to bring this straight down. So you multiply across, add straight down. Multiply across, add straight down. Okay, so go ahead and do that. If you need to enter in your placeholder, go ahead and enter in your placeholder. and then see if you can write your solution if you finished it. Okay, so you have 3 times -2, which is -6. Add straight down, -7. A negative times a negative is a positive. So positive 14, 14 plus 0. 14 times -2 is -28. -28 plus 5, -23. Negative times a negative is a positive, so this would be 46. 46 and -1 is 45. So I just like to circle that and write that that is the remainder. Okay, so you have a number, an x squared, and an x cubed. So I like to work my way backwards. Okay, so for this one, we need a placeholder for x squared. Okay, so don't forget to check for those placeholders if you are missing a term. Okay, and that includes the constant term. Now, when you are writing out your solution, we are writing this in the same form as yesterday. So we should have 3x cubed minus 7x squared plus 14x minus 23. And then remember, your remainder, just like yesterday, goes over what? The divisor. Now, the divisor isn't -2, it's x plus 2. Okay, so in this case, x plus 2 is the denominator.
How do we know what exponential value on
the coefficient?
Yeah, like
oh, here? Yeah, so it's always the power of the first term is 1 less than the degree of the dividend. So if this is x to the 4th, then 1 less would be x to the 3rd. So you could write x to the 3rd, x to the 2nd, x, the constant, and then the remainder. Okay, I start from the back because the last one's always the remainder. So then it's the constant, the x squared, x cubed, and I go up. Yep, but you could do either one. All right. Okay, so some of you may be thinking, well, why didn't we do this yesterday? Because this is so easy. Who even cares about long division? Valid thoughts, but you can only use this with certain forms. So if you had a quadratic, if you were trying to divide a quadratic, you wouldn't be able to use synthetic division. So you can only use synthetic division when the divisor is in the form x minus a, okay, which is a linear binomial with a leading coefficient of 1. So this can't even be like 2x plus 1. It would have to be an x value with a leading coefficient as 1. If you have something other than 1, we can manipulate the equation a little bit, which I am going to show you how to do. So if you have a coefficient other than 1, you must divide the numerator and the denominator by the leading coefficient. I'll just say the leading co, if that's okay. So if you have a leading coefficient other than 1, we are going to be dividing. Okay, kind of like when we were doing computing the square, we had a value that wasn't 1, we would do division. Okay, and then we are also going to be simplifying the remainder at the end. So if you have this, you can't just divide and everything's great. You are going to have to do one more step. All right, so for part C, your leading coefficient is 2. So if your leading coefficient is not 1, we are going to divide by that value. Okay, we are doing all of this without a calculator. In fact, if you want, you can write that this is a no-calc unit. Okay, because you'll have to practice this without it. So when you are dividing as 2 by 2, you are going to leave as a fraction, not a decimal. Okay, and for this one, I am going to write out what it would be when you divide. As you're doing this on your homework, you can go straight to the leading coefficient part, but I just want you to see where it's coming from, okay?
Random question for this question.
Yeah.
Would we be able to just use
No, because it's going to say use synthetic division. But could, if it said you choose, yes, you could use long division. Yep, and you wouldn't have to worry about the division piece. Yes. Okay, so let's divide the bottom because that will be simpler. So 2x divided by 2 is just x. Negative 1 divided by 2 is negative 1/2. So you just leave it as a fraction. Okay, and then we're going to divide everything in the top by 2. So 4 divided by 2, 2. So 2x to the 4th. Okay, if it doesn't go in evenly, we're going to keep it as a fraction. So negative 37 over 2, x squared. 4 divided by 2, 2x. 9 divided by 2, we're going to leave it as a fraction. Okay, so again, please give yourself some adequate space here because we are going to be working with fractions. Okay, and I find it helpful sometimes to write my starting value, x to the 4th, x cubed, my x squared. I guess I need to give myself more space. My x, that's my number term. That just helps me remember if I need to put a placeholder in. So I have 2, and then for x cubed, I need a placeholder. For x squared, you have negative 37 over 2. For x, 2, and you have a constant. Okay, if you were even missing a constant, you would have to put a placeholder in. All right, and then this 2 always drops down first. I try to do that first because sometimes people want to multiply right away because you're used to that. And then your divisor now, we are still going to set that equal to 0 and solve. So if we have x minus 1/2, if you set that equal to 0, your x value is 1/2. Okay, so when you're multiplying by a fraction, you are just dividing, in this case, by what? By 2. So what's 2 divided by 2? 1. And then we add straight down. 1 times 1/2 is 1/2. Oh, look, we have a common denominator. Yay! So that is going to give us negative 36 over 2. What is that reduced to? Negative 18. Okay, you can do that reduction in your head, or if you want to reduce after you write it down, that's okay too. So then what is half of negative 18? Negative 9. Add straight down. Okay, and I want you to add straight down and simplify if you need to. And then don't write down your answer yet, because remember I said we have to simplify the remainder. I want to do that with you. Okay, so 2 over 2 simplifies to 1. All right, so this is going to be your remainder. This is your number term. This is your coefficient of x, your coefficient of x squared, okay, your coefficient of x cubed. When you are simplifying the remainder, we are going to have to do one little part here, okay? So to simplify the remainder, you are just going to have to do some multiplication. Okay, so we are going to multiply by what changes your denominator so that it is no longer a fraction. So let's write out your remainder is 1, okay? So normally your remainder goes over the divisor, okay? In this case, your divisor is x minus 1/2 when you simplified it. We want to get it back so it's not a fraction anymore. So you are going to multiply by the denominator in the fraction, okay? Because you don't want any fractions in there. Okay, so multiply by, I want you to multiply by 2/2 because it's the denominator here. Multiply by the denominator of the fraction in the denominator. There's too many denominators here. So we're multiplying by the denominator of the fraction in the denominator. Okay, so it's of the divisor in this case. Then you won't have to worry about it, but for these you will. Okay. All right, so if I do 1 times 2, that's going to give me 2. And then here you distribute. So 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 1/2 is, yeah. So in this case, it is the same as what you had before in the denominator, but see how the numerator is now 2? Okay, so this is how you're going to write the remainder. Okay, so your solution is 2x cubed plus 1x squared minus 18x minus 7. And instead of plus 1 over this, you are going to write plus 2 over 2x minus 1. All right, so for part D, again, you have a leading coefficient that's not 1. So what am I going to do first? Divide everything by 4. Okay, so if it's not 1, you divide everything here by 4, and you divide everything here by 4. Okay, and then if you want to, we can set up our synthetic division here. So if you do 4x to the 4th divided by 4, you're going to get 1. Okay, I'm going to give you time to divide that and set this up. Okay, and you guys can double check with me. So we have, this is our x to the 4th, our x to the 3rd is 3/4, our x squared is -3, our x term, if this is a 1, it would be 1/4, and then your constant term is 9/4. Okay, when you divide the divisor, you had x plus 3/4 equals 0. So x is going to be -3/4. Okay, don't forget when you're moving it over, you have to do that opposite sign. Okay, so we're going to bring down the 1. So 1 times negative 3/4 is negative 3/4. So what happened here? 0. Yay. Because 0 times anything is 0. And then you add straight down. Now remember, when you are multiplying fractions, does the negative 3 get multiplied by the numerator, denominator, or both? Numerator. Can't be both. If it was both, it would divide and make 1. Do the same thing. Okay, so negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So this is 9/4. So if you add these together, you have 10/4, which reduces to 5/2. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Okay, and then from there, now when you multiply, please double check this. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15, and then you have to do denominator times denominator, which is 8. It's very common to just like keep one of the denominators. People forget to multiply sometimes. And then we are going to have to get a common denominator in order to add or subtract. So to get 8, we multiply by 2 and by 2. Okay, so times 2 would be 18. So these are equivalent. Okay, so 3/8 is going to be your remainder. This is your number, your x squared, your x cubed. Okay, we're going to simplify the remainder together. Let's write out this part first. Okay, so what you have is 1x cubed or x cubed. It's 0x squared, so you don't have to write the 0x squared. You can just go to the negative 3x, okay, plus 5/2, and then we are going to simplify this remainder, okay? So sometimes you have to simplify it with a fraction, like we did in this case. So what you would have is 3/8 divided by x plus 3/4. All right, so normally we would just multiply by 4, but that's not going to get rid of the fraction in the numerator. Okay, so if you have a fraction in the numerator, okay, you are going to multiply by 8 over 8 to eliminate the fractions. So if you have more than one denominator, you are going to have to multiply by the larger denominator. Okay, so let's see what happens there. So the goal is you don't want a fraction within a fraction. Okay, and you always multiply by something over itself. So 3/8 times 8 is just 3. When you distribute here, you have 8x plus, and then when you're doing 3/4 times 8, okay, you can think of this as over 1. 8 times 3 is 24. 24 divided by 4 is 6. So you have 3 over 8 plus 6. And doesn't that look so much more beautiful than all these fractions happening? Okay. And then we'll write our assignment down there in a moment.